Hello. So today I will walk you through the release notes of Rudder 8.2 released in October 2024. The first main feature of Rudder 8.2 is something we call security benchmarks. And the idea is to address the security policies compliance needs with a specialized feature. It was already possible through custom policies to more or less address this need, but the idea here is to provide something built-in. So it appears as a new page in the security section called security benchmarks. And here, if I create a new benchmark, so a benchmark is a set of control points applied to a system that will match a security policy that can either be an external security policy that, for example, comes from a norm that you have to comply with, or from an internal security policy coming from a security team. So here I have a few basic information to give. Then I select the target systems through the groups, and then you have to set the parameters to configure this benchmark. And our focus here is really to give precise configuration knobs, because one of the problems with security policies benchmarks is that it's often applied in a kind of a one-size-fits-all manner, where you expect all systems to be compliant with the same parameters. But in general, in an organization, you have exceptions, variants between the systems, and the idea that we try to have here is to allow the users to really customize the benchmarks in order for the result to be actually usable and not just theoretically usable. So to do this, we provide very precise control of the different components. So for example, here we can see that for each of the components, we can set them either in a disabled state or in an enabled state. And we actually have two enabled states, one that will just check and report if there are problems, which is called audit, and the enforce mode that will remediate the problems. So we have this first level of configuration, and then we have a second one for some of the items that can also take some additional parameters that will allow to customize what the actual values must be. It's especially important in the enforce mode because we have to set very specific value. For example, here it's file size. You can see how we configure a benchmark. That now I will show you how it looks like once you have applied it. So if I go back to the menu and select one benchmark which is already applied to the systems, we can see the results. So you can see that it uses the scoring system from A to F that we already have in Rudder for each of the sections, and we also have a global score. Then we have details for each of the section, where we can see, for example, our logging section. Here we can see that we have one item in audit mode, and if I go in the details, you can see the value which is applied and the state of the different systems. Here, all of the systems are actually failing for this control point. And as we are in audit mode, we don't do anything, we just report about the failure. And we also have a view by node, which is another entry point to analyze the compliance to this specific benchmark. So this is actually a kind of a technical preview. The feature will continue to be improved over the coming patch release and in Rudder 8.3 too. This was it for the feature itself. Now I'll talk a bit more about the benchmarks. So here you can see we've used something called hardening pack for Rudder. It's actually something that comes built in with Rudder and was built by the team based on very common control points that we can see in a lot of different security policies. But in the future, we'll also have ready-to-use benchmarks for some industry level, like CIS, for example. This was for the security benchmarks. Now let's have a look at the vulnerabilities management feature, which is also improved in Rudder 8.2. We have two changes here. The first one is that we can now also manage vulnerabilities for Windows systems. Up until now, it was only applied on Linux, but now we can see we have a Windows system here with CVEs associated, which is actually linked to the available updates on the systems through the KBs you can see on the right side column. So this is the first change in the vulnerability feature. The second one is that we can now create groups directly from the CVE interface. So for example, if I select one of the CVEs that I have on this system, I now have a create group button here that will allow directly creating the group without changing page. And if I go back to the groups page, you can see that I have my 6232 CVE here. And I can use this group to either apply a simple policy to immediately update the target package, or, for example, create a patch campaign that will update it in the future in a controlled manner. Speaking of patch campaigns, actually have improvements in the campaigns too. So the first one is a visual one. You now have, as you can see here, a summary of the outcome of each campaign events. So for this one, for example, we have one system which successfully ran and two systems with problems. I can click on it to have details. We can see that we also have the information here. And if I click on the tab, I have the details of what happened node by node. So this is it for the patch management. We also have a second new feature in patch management, which this time only target Linux systems, which is in the system update campaign, which actually update the whole system. We now have a new option called security only here that allows restricting the updates to only apply over updates marked as security updates in the local package manager. And so this restricts the scope of the update to only target the security fixes. So this is the second feature in update campaigns for Rudder 8.2. And that's all for the patch management side. We also have a small but really useful feature in some cases for a compliance feature of Rudder, the standard compliance in Rudder. One of the problems that some users had was that for systems that were disconnected from time to time or that were shut down, so for example, workstations or some embedded contexts, then it would affect the global compliance, as the nodes would be seen as in error, in no report error state. So the new feature is called compliance persistence, and the idea is that you can now configure at the node or group level that you want to keep the latest known compliance for the nodes for a specific amount of time, so let's say 1 day or 1 week. So this allows addressing the problem of workstations, for example, that are shut down at the end of the day and only switched up the next morning. The compliance will not drop, but will keep the latest known values. And this can also be used in some embedded context where the systems may not be available over the network continuously. Okay, so that was for compliance persistence. We now have an administration feature that has been significantly modified. It's the user management feature. It was previously in a plugin. It's now part of the base core of the Rudder application. And we also rewrote the UI to now have a list view, which is more convenient to use. And you can find the exact same features that you had before in the plugin, but now part of the base application. And I will end with two smallish, but really interesting features in the UI. So the first one is the ability to see what are the actual usage of some node properties. So this would be a problem until now, because once you have defined a node property, it's quite tricky to know where it's actually used. But now we have a new button near the property name where you can click, and then you can see where this property is actually used, the list of directives and techniques. And so you can check, for example, if you can safely remove it. And the last one is a modification to the status menu, which still contains the policy generation status, but now you can see it's just one item. And the idea is that we will use this menu to add additional information about errors. So in Rudder 8.2, we add all the errors linked to the technique editor, which will appear in this section, and it will continue to be updated to show all problems affecting the applied configuration to the systems, besides just the policy generation state, which was already there. So I've covered most user visible features. There are a few more technical changes listed in the release notes, but I won't cover them today. Thank you.